Hey guys, Becca Scoops here. How you guys doing? Hope you guys are doing well. Yeah, it's actually me. Hello. Well, the cat's out of the bag. This is what I look like, so I'm just going to go with it. So, for the last couple of weeks, I kind of been alluding to or teasing that um, something was coming up that I was really excited about, and it's actually happened. I was asked to do a podcast. Um, yeah, like a mainstream source. And I'm hoping that this will spur on other sources to pick up the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case and take a second look at it. Something that um, us in the anti gypsy community have been working towards all this time. We've been frustrated. There's a lot of drama that goes on in this community. But yeah, this morning I had to get up really early because the show that I was on is back east, and so 7:30 I had to be prepared and ready to go live. And so I have a clip from that, and in the description box you're going to find the link to the entire interview. I would really appreciate you guys to go over, click on that link and watch the entire interview when you get a chance. That would mean a lot to me. But as I say, I do have a clip that I'm going to share with you, and then you can go watch the rest of the interview later on. Okay, so here we go with the clip. Ready?
Possible. So putting those pieces together. So this would be the next jump in my mind is
This is the Miguel and Holly Show. I think it's a morning show, and it also is a podcast. These people were very generous with their time. I was on for about 30 minutes, and they were very welcoming and very interested in the case. So that's who they are.
Is it a possible theory then, if what the story we were told is not quite accurate? The mom, as you said, was a grifter,
Yeah.
con
Yep.
artist.
Yep.
Realized that she did have a daughter with maybe something going on, but then of course utilize that to like really help herself out, money, all this stuff. And of course, when you're the kid in this situation, you grow up with that. That's
Right.
the air you breathe. You're
Right.
growing up in a grifting household. And
Right.
so
And you're getting free stuff.
well,
As a
it-
child,
You
that's
are.
great.
the
Yeah.
even the and again, the abusive portions, nobody should go through that. However,
No.
and then she's mad at her mom and obviously very
Mhm.
upset, but then also knows how to grift. So
Yeah.
did she just take in a weird like pupil has become the teacher that kills a
Pretty
teacher,
much.
like
Pretty much we're seeing
all
that.
those
Mhm.
lessons and then
Yeah.
use it against her mom.
Yeah, sadly, she was surrounded by a lot of people that once they figured out that she could be a cash cow, right? That this story had legs, and everybody around her, and this is including the woman that helped her, this woman named Melissa Moore, who um, was a correspondent on the Dr. Oz talk show. Actually, her father is the happy face killer. So this woman named Melissa Moore, it was just on Paramount. There was just a Paramount series.
Yeah.
Okay, so Melissa Moore is the daughter of the happy face killer. She turned that notoriety into getting a gig with Dr. Oz, the Dr. Oz show, as his true crime correspondent. That's where she met Gypsy Rose Blanchard's stepmother, Christy Blanchard, okay, when Gypsy was still in prison. And Melissa saw, hey, this is going to be a big story, right? Melissa was astute enough to know, oh, you know what? Gypsy's got it going on. People want to know about Gypsy. And so she started cultivating a relationship with Gypsy Rose. That's how Gypsy Rose got her Lifetime series. That's how Melissa Moore was the conduit to go to Lifetime and say, hey, you guys are going to want a piece of this, And so then she got her the series and stuff like that. I guess my point is that Melissa, I also have a video about Melissa, and she was spreading untruths. She was like spreading outlandish untruths about Gypsy Rose. And I'm just like, oh my God, what is going on with these people? I don't know if Melissa is just repeating what Gypsy told her, or if Melissa is kind of like embellishing because she knows, to make Gypsy out to be the ultimate victim is the route to get her to be an influencer and more money. So yeah, Gypsy is definitely the behaviors that I've seen since she's gotten out. She is following in her mother's footsteps. You're right.
Mm.
This is like,
Wow.
Becca, you got my mind being blown over here. I'm like, what? And then you bring in the happy face killer, which
I
by
know
the way,
it's all over the place, right? It's just like you can't make this stuff up, right? You can't make it
no,
up.
you can't.
No.
By the way, that is a really good TV show. Happy Face Killer on Paramount Plus. I just watched it earlier
Yeah.
this summer. So what is your goal? What do you want after all of this? What are you hoping will come forth after, banging the drum that, hey, lies are
Yeah.
happening?
I think that, when you wanna I think that we want the mainstream media to maybe correct the record a little bit. Obviously, she's not gonna go back to prison. Also, I think that, for her mother's legacy, yeah, she wasn't she's got the grifting and the but she wasn't making her ill. And so is it fair that her mother is murdered and then she's also made out to be this monster?
Mm.
Because she wasn't really a monster. Maybe not the best mom and, questionable parenting stuff, right? But did she need to be murdered? And why is she constantly being vilified? That's another thing Gypsy uses her social media for, is to vilify her mother over and over again. She'll on Mother's Day, she'll put something up and then she'll say something bad about her mom. And you're like, girl, just stop. And I think that's what angers people and what we call the anti-Gypsy community, is because we want the record corrected. We want the mainstream media to pick up on this story and to correct the record for her mother's legacy.
Wow. I
That
mean,
is so interesting.
it,
And wow. Yeah.
well, I
I
guess,
So that's the clip, okay, that you could see that their minds were blown, and the guy even said my mind's blown. It was about a 30-minute interview, so we really got into the case. I covered it the best way I could. I'm not perfect. I critique myself, and there's other things I wish I would have mentioned. I critique myself. So I'm not perfect, but I tried my best, and I'm hoping that other mainstream sources will pick this up. And here's where I think this would be a great time to show these clips. And if any of you guys out there are interested in, now that why the iron's kind of hot, kind of heating up here with this, um, you guys could, and I know some of you have already done stuff like this, and so, don't feel like you need to do this again. But I think, and also, you guys know Lori, the dream expert. She's the one that's been helping me with this. She's the one who got me this interview. And so she's been working diligently behind the scenes. So please, if you don't follow her, you'll find her link in the description box. Also, please follow her. She's on TikTok and YouTube. I'm going to leave the links. But she's been working behind the scenes. She's been doing all the legwork, approaching mainstream sources, trying to get interviews. And so I want to, tip my hat to her, and kudos to her for doing that. She smartly suggested, I said, look, I'm going to take a clip. I'm going to make a video. What do you think? And she goes, maybe this is a great time also to ask people in the anti-Gypsy community that want to do something about this to write to local news programs, to other mainstream sources. And then she smartly also sent me some talking points. So you would craft your own letter, but yeah, let me pull this up. So these are some things that you can bring up in your, if you feel the need, if you feel that you're being called to write something, now that we have this video out there, we have these clips out there. Also, like I said, you'll find the link to the whole interview in the description box. Here are some things you can bring up that Lori brought up. Legal angles to explore. New evidence and case reexamination could newly release texts, videos, and medical records showing Gypsy's 1Q21.1 microdeletion disorder. Not abusive driven medical care justify revisiting her plea deal or parole terms. How does this reshape her legal and public narrative? Ethical platforming of criminals. What are the legal and ethical limits of platforms like YouTube, TikTok, or Lifetime, amplifying Gypsy's fame, especially with young fans idolizing her based on a questionable narrative? I gotta. Dee Dee's Law petition, thechange.org. Now, I know this is something that the Good Wives Network has brought out, and I think it's a great idea. There, I'm going to leave the link in the description box for this also. If you guys want to go over and sign this, please feel free to do. Take a look at it, anyways. And Lori brought this up also about it demands laws to block murderers like Gypsy from profiting from media deals and social media platforms. These used to be called the Son of Sam laws. It goes state by state. Anyways, that's something else you can bring up to your mainstream sources. Hey, there's this petition out there, you know, it's just going to drum up interest that would make a mainstream source maybe want to look into the case and write up something about it. Okay. Next, Nicholas Godejohn's botched trial. Godejohn, with an IQ of 82 with autism, got life while Gypsy served a short sentence. So a lot of people probably don't know that. You know, a lot of people that just saw the act or just aren't really paying attention to the Gypsy story. They don't know anything about this. So yeah. The last thing, cyberbullying and public backlash. With a mobile billboard confronting Gypsy, could she pursue cyberstalking claims? As a public persona weaken her legal standing? These are all great points. I'm going to think of some other points also, maybe and put them in the description box. But yeah, if you guys want to, please do, write your local news, show the clips of the interview, write up something that, some of these points, some of these talking points, it would be great. It would be so appreciated, okay. You know what? I'm new to being on camera, and I noticed that I didn't turn on my, you have like these little lights. That's very blinding. It's a little bit better. Sorry. See, this is how professional I am. The other thing I wanted to go over is I'm also in the description box going to put in a couple of my videos. Now, the one that is most watched is the called the timeline. That has the most views. But another one I thought that would be really good introduction of our talking points in the anti-Gypsy community is one that I made that has about 80,000 views, and it's the 5 truths that changes everything. And I wanted to go over a little bit of that and put that in this video if somebody wanted to use this video as something to send to a mainstream source. So here we go with that. Here's a little refresher course on the case. Oops, I got to take that down and add. Okay, here we go. Number 1. The media has mass reported Gypsy Rose Blanchard's mother had a disorder called Munchausen by proxy. This is not true. To understand how Nicholas Godejohn got screwed by the justice system, we have to explain a few things about Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Thanks to the mainstream media, most people believe Gypsy. Yeah, I sped up myself. I know I talk slow in these videos, but I'm trying to, make my points and not talk really fast. But for the purposes of this video, I went ahead and sped myself up. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was systematically medically abused for years by her mother, Claudinia Dee Dee Blanchard. The media has mass reported Dee Dee had a disorder called Munchausen by proxy. However, the truth is her mother was never diagnosed with that disorder. It's also called factitious disorder imposed by another. In fact, according to Dee Dee Blanchard's official autopsy, which includes her entire medical history, Dee Dee was never diagnosed with any mental illness. This might be the most inconvenient truth that keeps Gypsy Rose up at night. She knows Dee Dee was never diagnosed with Munchausen by proxy. Thus, there was never any clear cut proof Gypsy was being systematically abused, and she had no reason then to plot her mother's demise. One big red herring revolves around Dr. Mark Feldman, who claimed Dee Dee had Munchausen by proxy after she was deceased.
As soon as I was aware of the case, I started searching the internet and trying to acquire all the information I could. And it became one of the least difficult cases I've ever seen in establishing this as Munchausen by proxy, which is when people make others under their control either sick or lie about their illnesses or exaggerate their illnesses, all to get some kind of emotional gratification for themselves.
Notice Feldman admits he searched the internet to find out facts about the case. Well, this is just ludicrous. Doctors don't search the internet to diagnose someone with a rare disorder. In fact, Feldman had never treated Dee Dee Blanchard. He was brought into the case by HBO, who were working closely with the Blanchards to make a pro-Gypsy documentary. Feldman was paid handsomely for his so-called opinion on Dee Dee Blanchard. That's when the mainstream media picked up on Feldman's so-called diagnosis. This is one way the fallacy that Dee Dee was diagnosed with Munchausen by proxy got spread. Additionally, right after Gypsy was arrested, her public defender Mike Stanfield set out to come up with a strategy to convince the district attorney not to seek the death penalty. That's right, the death penalty was on the table for Gypsy Rose.
All of us involved are it's relief. At the very beginning of this, there was the question of the death penalty on the table. Ultimately, it's the best outcome for her. It's the best outcome for the state of Missouri, and ultimately the right thing to do for everybody.
However, what's quite telling is the fact Gypsy never mentions the so-called medical abuse during her intense interrogation. The detective pushes Gypsy up against the wall, informing her they are aware she knows something about her mother's demise. Instead, Gypsy's instincts are to throw her boyfriend, Nicholas Godejohn, under the bus.
I'm unable to.
So did you kill your mom?
No, sir.
Did you help
No, sir.
Nicholas kill your mom?
No, sir. No, sir.
Did you have knowledge that Nicholas was going to kill your mom? Before he did?
Yes, sir.
Then Gypsy backs up that lie with hoping Nick can get help for his violent ways. When the evidence showed Gypsy was the real mastermind of the heinous crime, and Mr. Godejohn was badly taken advantage of by Gypsy Rose.
I'm sorry that I lied to you for a minute. I'll tell you the truth all now.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
I love him so much, but maybe he can get help now. That's finally what you he killed my mom.
However, wouldn't this be? I hope he can get help now. Oh my God, I can't. I want to fast forward just a minute to, because I know you guys know most of this, to the, want to reiterate that immediately after this Munchausen thing came out, this was not, it was just this one guy that said it. It was that the mainstream media picked up on. Other forensic psychologists and psychiatrists did not agree. So let's go over that real quick. Psychologists at the time were not on board with diagnosing Dee Dee with Munchausen by proxy. One was Dr. Ann Roast, the assistant head of the psychology department at Missouri State University. She said, quote, "For one, the victim, usually a child, isn't aware of the deception," Roast opined. She added, "It's unclear to this point how much Gypsy Blanchard knew about her condition, but certainly she knew she could walk," end quote. Also, Rose said there's a similar but different disorder in which people fake medical issues for financial gain. That's called malingering. Quote, "I don't have all the details of this case, but it certainly appears they were benefiting financially," Rose said, end quote. Then there's forensic psychologist Dr. John Mathias from the YouTube channel Hidden True Crime, who also opined Dee Dee did not meet the diagnostic criteria for Munchausen by proxy, which is also called. I talk about this in the interview because literally this interview was the one that floored me. And when we were first starting our YouTube channel, and I said, "Oh my gosh," I said to Mitch, my husband, I said, "Oh my gosh, you have to see this. What this guy says. This is what made me just go, there's something going on in this case." Called factitious disorder imposed by another.
Need to occur in the absence of obvious external rewards. They don't. Dee Dee is clearly doing this for external rewards and for external gain, right? And so, in that sense, technically speaking, Gypsy Rose doesn't even meet criteria for factitious disorder imposed on another.
However, so the point there is what he was going over there is that there's like, I don't know how many bullet points, but I think there's 5 maybe bullet points for it to be Munchausen by proxy. And so he was going over those. And then he said, let me just back it up again so you guys can hear it.
For factitious disorder imposed on another.
However, the diagnostic criteria for Munchausen by proxy, which is also called factitious disorder imposed by another.
Need to occur in the absence of obvious external rewards. They don't. Dee Dee is.
It needs to occur with the absence of external rewards, meaning that for it to be Munchausen by proxy, she can't be motivated by external rewards.
Clearly doing this for external rewards and for external gain, right? And so, in that sense, technically speaking, Gypsy Rose doesn't even meet criteria for factitious disorder imposed on another.
However, so that was it for me when I saw that, and then I saw her interview on the Vile Files. That was it. I was hooked. I was like, there is something wrong in this. There is something we don't know. There is, because I watched the act and I felt for her. I just was like, yeah, I wasn't a cheerleader when she got out, when she was getting out, but I was like, oh, good, she's getting out, because I watched the act and I had some sympathy towards her. What a horrible situation. And then when I heard, these other forensic psychologists and psychiatrists in the beginning of the case were like, no, we don't think it meets the criteria. And it was just that one doctor, Dr. Mark Feldman, who was hired by HBO. It's on the HBO's payroll for Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. He's the one that all the mainstream media picked up on. That's how it got in the ether, right? That's how the Munchausen by proxy got in the ether, by the mainstream media picking it up from the Mommy, Dead, and Dearest documentary, which was pushed by Mike Stanfield and Christy Blanchard, is what I'm told. So one other clip here I want to bring up. Bear with me. It's about how weird Gypsy's plea deal was. Okay, how odd this whole thing was. That, yeah. Here we go. Explain how unbelievable Gypsy Rose Blanchard's plea deal truly was. The best example we can come up with are other serious similar crimes. Usually, when a plea deal is offered in a murder case, the DA is offering the deal in order to get something back in return. For example, in Florida, Mark Severs got his best friend, Curtis Wright, to kill his wife. When Mr. Wright got arrested, the DA offered him a second-degree plea deal in exchange for his testimony against the man who plotted his wife's demise. So in this case, in other cases, this is how it works. So Gypsy gets the plea deal, right? This is a murder case. It's a death penalty case in the beginning at that point, right? Just like this case out of Florida. So you have a husband who hires his best friend, gonna tell his best friend, I'll give you X amount of dollars to kill my wife. The guy goes and kills his wife. Okay. They're caught. the DA approaches the best friend, the guy who, murdered, okay, because the husband didn't want to plead, okay, he was going to plead innocent, got this guy to offered him a plea deal to bring it down to second-degree murder, the same thing Gypsy got, second-degree murder, right? A plea deal. They brought it down from first degree to second degree in exchange for his testimony against the guy, his friend that had his wife killed, right? So in order for this guy to get the plea deal, he had to give something. And what he had to give was his testimony against the other guy. Got it? That's how a plea deal usually works in this kind of a case, this serious kind of a case. Okay. So let's see what happens with Gypsy. Mark Sievers. After Wright testified against Sievers at trial, Mark Sievers got the death penalty for plotting his wife's murder. That's how a plea deal usually works. So we have to ask, what did the DA get for offering Gypsy Rose Blanchard her sweet plea deal? Why didn't the DA make her plea deal in exchange for Gypsy testifying against Nick Godejohn? Why didn't the district attorney want Gypsy Rose Blanchard to testify against Nick? If Gypsy was a credible source of information, the DA would not have hesitated to make her a witness against Mr. Godejohn. In fact, DA Patterson would have required Gypsy Rose Blanchard testify against Godejohn if she wanted that great plea deal. Everything would have hinged on Gypsy Rose Blanchard testifying against Mr. Godejohn. We can't stress this point enough. Almost every other felon who takes a plea deal in similar cases, it's always in exchange for their testimony against their co-defendant, but not Gypsy. At some point, it became very clear to the DA that Gypsy was not credible. She was a liar. Her story could not be trusted. However, the plea deal was already in place. So all DA Patterson could do to ensure his case was successful against Nick Godejohn was to make sure Gypsy would not be cross-examined by Nick's attorneys. So here we have in Gypsy's deal, they give her the sweet plea deal based on this Munchausen by proxy thing. That was the mitigating factors. But they didn't require her to testify against Nick Godejohn. Why not? Why wouldn't that have been included? That would have been the smart thing to do, right? Because the DA wants to make sure in a case like this that someone's getting life, at least. It's a death penalty case. They drop it down to a life case. They take the death penalty off the table. But still, it's the DA's job to make sure someone's going away for life. And so his best bet in a case like this would be to have the Gypsy testify against Nick, but he doesn't. That is shocking. That is shocking. I can't, like I said in the video, I can't stress enough how shocking this is. And then to make sure that she can't be cross-examined, right? Because if she ends up being his witness for the prosecution, she goes on the stand and the prosecutor will ask the questions. But then it's the other attorneys, Nick's attorney's chance to come and cross-examine her. And that's where there's different rules where they can hammer her. They can really hammer her to try to get to the truth. And the DA could not risk Gypsy on the stand as his witness. Now, Gypsy on the stand as Nick's witness, there's no problem. Because the DA is not going to go after her. He would be the one cross-examining then. See, because she's his witness. So the DA would be the one to cross-examine. And as the defense attorneys, as Nick's witness, Nick's attorneys can't hammer her. You can't hammer your own witness. The only way you can do that is by taking them as what's called a hostile witness, which Nick's attorney never does. And so all this told me was, and Mitch, all it told us was that the DA knew Gypsy was a liar and unreliable, and he couldn't risk having her on the stand as his witness because really, maybe the truth might come out. And it was too far gone. The mainstream media had said the Dee had Munchausen. He had already offered Gypsy the sweet plea deal. That boat had sailed. He couldn't go back on that. So all he had left was to make sure Nick went to prison for life. Okay. So that's all I have for today. I know this is really different for me, right? This is different. But yeah, we're trying to move on. We're trying to get something done here. You know, it's not just about regurgitating the same facts. Yeah, I regurgitated some same things because these are important points that I'd love for a mainstream source to pick up on. These are the points that made all of us go, "What?" Right? These are the points that made us drawn to the anti-gypsy community and to look into it further, right? It's why we're all here. These are the points. And I'm sure you guys have other points too that I'm, leaving out. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. It's not like I'm going to be on camera every time. I'm not, because, sometimes I'm just, yeah. But, let me make clear why I decided to show my face. I knew when Lori approached me to do these interviews, these potential interviews that she could get, that it would not be so compelling. And she even told me she agreed. Will you go on camera? Is it okay? And I'm like, I had to make a decision because if I was just going to be behind my avatar, it's, just like in the interview that you guys will see, if you guys, go and watch it, if I was just an avatar, it wouldn't be as compelling. It wouldn't be as professional. And so I was willing to do that. I'm not a martyr or anything, but I'm just explaining to you why I decided to do it is because I am dedicated to this case and I am dedicated to getting the truth out. And so if that meant showing my face, then I showed my face. So yeah, that's why I decided to do it. It was my choice and it's okay. All right. That doesn't mean I'm going to show it all the time, but I'm just saying. All right, guys. Anyways, that'll do it for me. Thank you for tuning in to Becca Scoops. If you aren't already subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing to our Becca Scoops. If you're not a member, consider becoming a member. I am going to be doing a live. Will I do it on camera? Maybe. Should I do it? I don't know. You guys tell me. I'll be doing a live within the next couple of days. I know I keep saying that, but then this came up, so I had to make this video. But I will be going live, and we can discuss this and discuss other things, and hopefully some of you guys will have felt the need to write some letters to local news sources and stuff like that. If you need any other guidelines about how to write that letter, email me, beccascoops@gmail.com. I'll be happy to help you. All right. All right, guys. Thanks so much. That'll do it for me. All right, guys. Bye.